it's time for us to open the Q&A session and hand over the what do you call conversation to the participants. I think people who want to ask a question may please raise their hands there and then ask us, or unmute yourself and ask.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Yes, who's this?
This is Rashid speaking.
Yes, Rashid, go ahead.
Yes, if I may, with your permission.
Yeah, if you could be brief so that others can get a chance, Rashid. Yeah.
I'll just quickly, it's a comment and question all in one so that I don't talk the
go ahead,
microphone.
please.
Right. So the first point you made was the Bible was not in Jesus' language, that is Aramaic. And however, we know that the Quran is unexpurgated, untranslated, except for when it did translate, there were problems coming into it, as was said by Brother Faiz. So my point therefore is, maybe you can answer all at once at the end after making point if you want to, if you don't remember. This may be something which is a bit controversial, I'm going to say, but could it be that because of the translations over the years, in the 70s, New York, the biblical scholars came together and said that there are over 50,000 recorded errors in the Bible. Could this be among the errors that we're speaking about? For example, when you speak about Pharaoh's daughter and the child. And the next question I have, or point is, Barnabas, who is mentioned in the 4 remaining New Testament books, is mentioned as a prince, a king among men, somebody honorable, etc. And he says in his book, which you didn't even mention in your list, I found it missing, that I wonder why it's missing, because you were very, very detailed, and I'm most surprised that you didn't mention this. You mentioned apocryphal, you mentioned others. Maybe you forgot, maybe you don't realize, maybe you don't know. I have no idea, really. You'll answer that at the end. Barnabas states in his book that in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the soldiers who didn't know what Jesus looked like came in to arrest him, Judas put his arms around Jesus to show him, the soldiers, this is Jesus. And in the hue and the tumult and the confusion, when the people surrounded both the people embracing, according to Barnabas, the person who was taken up and put on the cross was not Jesus, who according to Islam was taken up to heaven, but it was the one who for 20 pieces of silver, Judas, was the one who was crucified on the cross. And maybe that's why he said, Father, you know not what you do, or whatever he said. Sorry, not what you know, whatever, but you know what I mean. Geiger, you mentioned 2 points about Geiger assumed that an unlettered prophet took from the Jewish scriptures. How can an unlettered prophet in rural Arabia, unable to read, unable to write, take? And in the same point, I'd like to mention that you said Ar-Rahman and Bismillah were united by the South and North Arab. No, sir. My response is that the Quran is pre-Zabur and pre-Injil, is all from God, and it was in Lahw Mahfuz. You probably know what Lahw Mahfuz is, where the Quran was in a tablet preserved up in Jannah, in heaven, and came down later on, and was pre-Zabur and pre-Torah, and therefore, even if he knew or somebody told him what was in those, it was not taken from there. It was from the original Lahw Mahfuz, which was sent to him directly, and not via 300 years later in Aramaic and other languages. Point number 4, if I may just have, is that
I think you need to finish a bit far, Rashid. I think.
Okay, I just got 3 more points because I wanted to call.
No. I think you can come again after that. I think he needs to remember all this to answer, right? So I think we can stop here and maybe after his answer, maybe after that, yes.
Okay, can I finish my last point, or shall I leave it?
Yeah, no, I think you leave it here, Rashid, so that you can come back again, right?
Okay,
no.
okay.
I mean,
thank
possibly
you very much.
Gabriel can't answer all your questions in one go, obviously, right?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rashid. Thank you. Very important points. I really appreciate your insights and your engagement with the topic. I mean, just briefly on the topic of errors in the Bible. There's an interesting way of thinking through this topic. And we need to do our best to separate ourselves from a religious competition and try to work systematically through these problems. With the question of Moses and any of the patriarchal figures from the early periods, we're speaking of with Moses about 1,000 years before Christ. You know, this is an period of time where we have no other historical records. The Bible and the book of Exodus, most of which was written in the 6th century, but some of it could have been written in quite close to in what is known as the Yahweh source, could have been written already in the 10th century BC. So these are our oldest sources for it. We don't have other sources about the story of Moses from, let's say, ancient Egyptian or Assyrian or something like that. And so it's very difficult to speak about errors, because how do you compare things like that? So that's one issue. The Gospel of Barnabas is not taken as an ancient source by academic scholars of the Bible. Our two manuscripts for it come from the 16th century. They're in Italian and Spanish. We have no ancient witnesses in any ancient language to it, and so it's not taken into consideration. And then, yeah, the question of the unlettered prophet, the meaning of ummi, that's a whole nother topic. There's a debate over, you know, whether ummi, I mean, we also have ummi in the plural, right? So huwa alladhi ba'atha fil ummiyin rasulan minhum, were they all unlettered, or does ummi mean something else? Possibly a different meaning, something like Gentile or something. I would incline to that interpretation of ummi, not as unlettered, but of course the traditional doctrine, which I appreciate and respect, is that he was unlettered. So I would leave the question open.
Yes, I think I agree with you there, Gabriel. Ummi does not mean unlettered. In my opinion, to ummi actually means to someone whom a prophet had not come. Gentile would be a better word, in a word, to a community to whom, because the whole community is ummi, the Quran says. Basa fil ummiyun. So everybody can't be possibly unlettered, obviously, right? So anyone else who want to ask a question?
I think Shahid Sahab was ahead of me, although I'm ready to ask a question, but he was ahead of me. Shahid Mati.
Okay, good evening to everyone.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Gabriel, for your lecture. Can I start with a question and ask what is, or rather, I do not find in your talk...
Can you please introduce yourself, if you don't mind?
I'm Shahid Mati. I'm from South Africa in Johannesburg.
Okay.
So thank you, Professor, for your talk. But I start with a question, and maybe it is a statement. I do not find in your talk at all the historical context of the Quran, the topic set out, except insofar if historical context means the Quran's subordinate relationship to other texts and other scriptures. In other words, because the Quran is clearly the borrower here, and therefore throughout your talk, it's interesting that there's always confusion in the Quran. It's difficult to unread, or I'm quoting from your talk, difficult to unravel, to explain the problem of the Quran, the difficulty of Ar-Raqim. So yes, there's a historical context, but the Quran is clearly in your talk is subordinate because it is a borrowing text. It has no intelligibility on its own from your talk. And therefore, in another paper of yours that I read, you constantly speak about the Quranic authors, but who are these authors of the Quran? Interesting, in your talk, in your papers, you don't refer to Muhammad at all. Now, it's not my concern whether Muhammad is the author of the Quran or whether they are 30, 40. That's not my concern anymore. I think that question is obsolete, whether the Quran is from God. As a Muslim, I certainly believe that the Quran is from God. But that's too theological. Even if we take the view, and I'm comfortable with that view to argue and to entertain someone saying that the Quran, Muhammad is the author of the Quran, or the Quran is many other authors. But who are these authors? In which eras do they live? Because that context to you, Dr. Gabriel, is clearly not important because the Quran is not intelligible. It is clearly always just a borrowing text, notwithstanding, of course, and to be fair to you, that you say the Quran has its own particular theological message. But it is quite clear to you from your, and this is a rather more sophisticated Orientalist trope that continues, after John Wansbrough, and they have been responded to, or even refuted. So I'd like to really understand who is the author of the Quran for you. Where do they take it from? in exactly which era, because all that is really jumbled up. And that is what I'm saying, it's not accidental. And I think you are a bit sensitive aware of Muslim feelings, and therefore at one stage you say problem, not really a problem. But in reality, the Quran is a problem to you because it is a mumbled text that is continues to be borrowed from others, notwithstanding its own authentic message. I won't be long anymore because there are many other people. And that is why I think the preamble to your talk, the first half or even 2/3 of your talk, was exactly to refer to all these other literatures, because it reinforces constantly how the Quran borrows, how it is not intelligible, etc. And perhaps even the problem with many Muslims is that we see the Quran too much as a theological text. Now, it is, of course, theological, but what is alongside its anthropological? So, for example, to claim that the Quranic concept of monotheism and Judaic concept of monotheism is the same is absolutely a fallacy in history, anthropologically, because the Jewish notion of one God is about a chosen people, whereas the Quran is about all people. So perhaps it's important that Muslims start searching for the anthropological character alongside the particular theological message of the Quran. I think I will stop there because I find severely problematic that your talk is really a continuation of the old Orientalists. It is very much more sophisticated, etc. So I leave it at that and say that I don't find the Quran has no message. It's got no hermeneutic. It is always constantly to be read in relationship to these other scriptures. And that for me is problematic. Thank you, sir.
So thank you so much for your thoughts. Obviously, we have a fundamental disagreement. I certainly did not say the Quran is a mumbled text, and it's probably not appropriate for you to imply that I did. In fact, I explicitly said that no longer do we speak of the Quran borrowing, and you repeated many times that I said that.
No, that's a cover.
Oh, no, let me continue. Sorry, let's just be patient. Be patient.
I think you do
be a good patient man. Shahid, be patient. Be patient.
I think you need to let Gabriel answer, please.
Be patient. Sabr is a very good quality, and you should manifest.
This is not a debate. Please.
I repeatedly said that the Quran, it's not a question of borrowing, but it is a text in a particular tradition, and that tradition is found in texts such as the Sleepers of Ephesus. If you're not convinced of my arguments that it is related, for example, to the Sleepers of Ephesus, that's fine. You're not the only one not to be convinced of me. There are others as well who are not convinced, so I respect that. I will add just one more thought about what you said in regard to Judaism, which is not connected, but that's actually much more complicated to say that Judaism or the Hebrew Bible is only concerned about the chosen people. I'd encourage you to read the 2nd chapter of Isaiah, which has a vision of global peace of all nations, and to read more about Judaism, which certainly has an idea that Israel has a special relationship with God, but has a beautiful vision of peace between all people. I don't mind if you want to respond. I just wanted the respect to be able to speak. So if you want to respond, that's fine with me, no problem. And Faiz, however you want to manage the discussion.
No, I think let's not make it into a debate, Gabriel. I think he has made his point, but from my point of view, you didn't make any such insinuation against the Quran, whether it's a mumbled text or whether it's just a borrow. I don't think that came out from your talk. I feel your arguments were quite different, and perhaps the questioner, I think, has misunderstood what you really said. I think now we should move on to the next question. If
Yes, this is Afsar Ali. I'm right in your neighborhood, barely 100 miles away from you, Chicago area. Thank you very much, Professor Reynolds, for your talk. Appreciate it. There are a couple of questions. One is I would like you to specifically address it, although you mentioned it in passing, the extract from a thesis called Luxembourg thesis, which was put out about 15 years ago, claiming that Quran was revealed in some other language than Arabic, and that Arabic evolved much later than the 6th or 7th century. Do you subscribe to that? And the second part of my question is, Quran never claims exclusivity. In fact, doesn't claim originality. It says every nation in the past was sent a revelation, or was given a revelation. Every nation. So if something, if two people, A and B, say that sky is blue on a clear day, it doesn't mean that A, either copied or got it somehow from B. It just means that, hey, both of those could be completely independent, evaluations and judgments. So both could be revelation from God. For example. It never claims originality. And as far as relying on earlier scriptures, where should I start and where should I stop when I see explicitly different positions mentioned in Quran versus the Bible? For example, one of them was what Mr. Faiz had already mentioned about the Trinity, or even sonship, Son of God, or for that matter, there are many other instances, even for example, chosenness based on DNA, just because a certain lineage, somehow one is chosen, which explicitly Quran rejects. And there are innumerous things, even science has come up with the issues with Bible. Where should I stop believing the Bible in order to understand the Quran? Where should I stop reading the Bible, and where should I start? That's what my question is. The third question you could say. Thank you.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much. And we'll have to meet for some Chicago pizza or something.
Look forward to it. Deep dish pizza.
Exactly. So wonderful questions. So first, the thesis of someone named Christoph Luxembourg, which you may know is a pseudonym, written originally in German, later translated into English, was exactly as you say, that the original language of the Quran, he calls it in German a Mischsprache, which means just a mixed language. And he argues that when you strip the Quran down to its consonantal text, and you're open to reinterpreting the ta'rib, or how to complete the consonants and add the vowel signs, and you use the insights of Aramaic, suddenly you get all sorts of new arguments and new ideas. And the most famous one, you may know about this, Afsar, was the idea that Hur Ain actually refers to grapes and not to women in paradise. The Luxembourg thesis is not taken very seriously among academic scholars of the Quran. I find it completely incorrect in almost every argument. Here and there are some interesting points about it, but to me, the Quran, the heart of the Quran, for example, in Surah An-Nahl, you have the famous passage which says, we know there's one of them, the one you're pointing to, but his tongue is Ajami, wa hadha Quran and Arabiyyan mubin, right? So the Quran is very strong about this is Arabic language, and I think we have to take that seriously. Having said that, we do know more and more about Aramaic being present in Arabia in the 6th and 7th century. And so in my presentation, I showed that mixed Arabic-Aramaic inscription. The Nabateans used the two interchangeably. So Aramaic is something of interest to me. I would agree with you. It's not my job to do theology, of course, for the Muslim community, but I think it is completely coherent theologically to say that we have commonality between Quran and Bible because God revealed it at one point in the biblical context and then revealed it again in the Quranic context. To me, that's very coherent. So there wouldn't be any incoherence in that view at all. And as I said in the beginning, I'm a believer in God. I want to encourage people to believe in God. I don't want to disrupt people's faith. And I think looking in sophisticated ways at Quran and Bible, this doesn't need to in any way weaken your faith. It just makes it more refined. So I would agree with that. Then finally, where do you stop looking at difference or at the Bible to be of interest for the Quran. I mean, yes, there are many differences, and even on basic points theologically, but also, some of the points like whether that I mentioned about Moses being an adopted son or grandson of Pharaoh. Another interesting case also dealing with Egypt is the figure known as Haman in the Arabic, who is in Egypt in the Quran, but in the biblical story, you may know, we have a figure named Haman who has a very similar role, who is instead in Iran and Persia in the book of Esther. So why do we have this contrast? I mean, I'm not advocating that Muslims somehow give priority to the Bible. I would say that the Quran itself draws your attention, even using the vocabulary like remember or have you not heard, those sorts of phrases which sort of direct the audience to the biblical tradition. It also means to correct it. I mean, the Quran in Surah An-Nisa says, Ya Ahl al-Kitab, la taghlu fi dinukum, O people of the book, don't go to excesses in your religion. So it does mean to reprimand it, and reprimand Christians and Jews for different doctrines. So obviously it's complicated, and I'll leave the theology to the sophisticated Muslim theologians who think through these things.
God bless you.
Thank you.
This is Imtiaz Uddin. I am also in Chicago. Thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your well-researched presentation. If monotheism was prevalent in the 6th century, why did Prophet Muhammad struggle so hard to establish it in Mecca? He met great resistance to the idea of monotheism. So I need some clarification on this. And I also have a second question. Present-day sciences are hinting on quantum intelligence and universe is perceived rather than real. Is there any hint or any possibility in any religious text to support this idea that universe is not real existence, it is all perceived?
Thank you so much, Mr. Imtiaz. And what a question. My goodness, that is a tough one. And maybe I'll focus on the first one. But it's definitely an important point, and a lot of interesting scholars are working on those more philosophical questions. And also related questions such as transhumanism, what is the sense of intelligence, artificial intelligence. But let me start with the first one. I would agree that the Quran obviously has a great concern with shirk and mushrikun. Jesus is even said to have the same concern in the passage that's been brought up, or just before, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 72. Jesus himself says, "Men yushrik billah fama'wahu an-nar." Whoever does shirk is among the people of the fire. So the Quran has this great concern with shirk. I don't deny it, and I'm not arguing that there was no paganism or polytheism left in Arabia. I think it's very likely that the problem with shirk, or the interest in shirk, was a reaction to the spread of monotheism in Arabia and the dying out of paganism. If we look at the similar example in the growth of Christianity, the most intense polemics against paganism in the early Christian period are at the period where paganism is dying, in the 4th and 5th centuries in the Byzantine Empire, for example. I would say it's parallel. The example given by Professor Al-Jalad of Ohio State is very interesting, of this one inscription that mentions both Allat, the goddess Allat that we know from Surah An-Najm in the Quran, and also a god who's known as the One, which is probably a reference to the Jewish God, which suggests there was, for some Arabs, a borrowing of the Jewish God, an incorporation of the one God into Arab pagan life. And that, from the Quran's perspective, would seem to be shirk. Yes, you believe in the one God, but you haven't given up your other gods. You haven't given up. So I would agree that the concern with paganism is real. Thank you.
Yeah.
I am Nyana Patrick from the Department of Christian Studies
Yes,
from the
Dr.
University of Madras. I appreciate Gabriel for opening a new vista in terms of proposing an intertextual study. I think it fits in very much in that genre of intertextual studies which are being proposed today. And as you rightly stated at the beginning itself, that you are studying Quran as a text. Now, my question is, from your experience, what actually is the prospectus of such studies, especially when they tend to get encompassed under value-added judgments and statements, especially from the perspective of faith? Do you think the efforts that are being made from several traditions, whether they are Christian or Islam or even other Indian traditions, there are good scholars who are proposing this type of study, intertextual study. What actually is the promise that it is giving to, say, religious harmony in the world? Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Patrick, and thank you for joining and for your question. I know it's a very sensitive topic, and I think it's important to recognize, as an earlier questioner did, that there is a history of critical scholarship in the West, sometimes called Orientalism, which at sometimes has been openly hostile to Islam and the Quran. People speak about this constantly now in Western scholarship. There's a great concern not to repeat the sins and errors of previous generation of scholars, but also to keep in mind that there was very similar scholarship being done on the Bible in early Christian tradition. Right. So it was not only Islam, also on Hinduism and Confucianism and Taoism. So, I mean, really, you have the rise of a movement in the West, which was originally centered in Germany, of something like religious studies. The question of how to advance dialogue and interfaith harmony in the context of these scholarly matters is complicated. In the West is increasingly secular, and many scholars in Islamic studies and Quranic studies are atheists or not believers, so they have no concern for this topic at all. Other scholars are more and more in the West are Muslims. The younger generation of scholars is majority Muslims who are working in the West. So we're seeing a new context and new interest in questions of Muslim theology in the West. So, I mean, I would say just personally, my interest is to do what the Quran itself demands of us. The Quran, it asks us to be qawm yatafakkarun, to be a people who think, to engage with it. This is an important part of the Islamic tradition itself. I mean, listen, when we look at the works of scholars like Fakhruddin al-Razi, and Jalaluddin Suyuti, and many of the great intellectual figures of the history of Islamic academics, there's great interest in understanding the Quran's historical context and its relationship to other languages and religions. So, you know, at its best, this sort of scholarship can continue that legacy. Obviously, what people say, mutatis mutandis. So, you know, for me, it's as an outsider, but hopefully with respect. I don't know if that gets at your question, but I hope it does a little bit.
Thank you.
I can even see Martin Akkad, another top scholar from Lebanon. Martin Akkad, you have anything to say?
Thank you very much for this description also that I don't deserve. Thank you, Reynolds. Thank you for an excellent talk. I wasn't, frankly, thinking about any questions. I'm listening with great interest. So I would rather leave the floor for people who have raised their hands.
I can understand.
Good to see you, Martin.
Very nice to see you, Gabriel.
Anyone else, please go ahead.
I think Abdul Majid has a question, maybe Bavand as well.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. My name is Bhavan Sadeghi. I'm a student of atmospheric science, not theology, not religious study at University of Houston. So the study of Christianity and Islam is part of my passion. I have an thought, just I want to briefly share with you from my experience of living with Christians and talking with Muslims. And that is the idea of divine personality in Christianity, which seems to be has a position in Christian faith and their theology, which I did not find any synonym in Islam. We know that the concept of Trinity has something to do with personality of God and divine personality. This is actually a name of a book, Personality of God in Islam, written by Richard Nicholson, I think. The idea is he was trying to say how the divine personality in Christianity was established, was discussed, and does Islam have any synonym? My point is right now, or question is that could we say the idea of Trinity or concept of Trinity in Christianity was discussed within a couple of centuries, and it was not established or discussed or formed in the same way in Islam because of some specific definitions or limitations, which we cannot describe God as a person in Islam. I just want to, for example, say something. Personality in Christianity does not have a synonym in Arabic language. I could not find a synonym in Arabic language, neither in Persian language. I am my main language is Persian. I'm Iranian. We have the term shakhsiyat in Arabic language, which is more which does not mean personality. Or we have the huviyat in Arabic language, which is another term close to is piety, but not personality. We have the term zat for Allah, which is more to a sense of Allah, of God. We also have fard. We have many words in Arabic, but not personality. Yeah, that is just. I just want to say something. One of my Christian friends, he was a pastor at the University of Houston. He sent me a link of a debate between Dr. Shabir Ali and Dr. William Lane Craig back to 2003 or 2002. It was about the definition of loving God. Dr. William Lane Craig, I think most of the people in this meeting know him. He is well known for his arguments in Kalam cosmological theology. Dr. Craig kind of take the idea of development of the theology for God. He raised the question if Islamic God or Allah, it could be loving God or not, and he was saying it could not be a loving God. And Dr. Shabir Ali as a Muslim, was coming with another idea. But what I realized was that the argument of Dr. William Lane Craig was formed or has something related to personality of God, because the idea of Trinity will help you or give you evidences or strengthen your argument to defend God as a loving God. Because when you're saying God has sent his son to save the world, to save every person, and this is an argument that could be used for the objective of loving God, and the same, like the similarity is not present in Islam, because your God in Islam is just immanence and transcendence, and that's why we cannot form a personality for God. So that was just thought. Sorry about that.
I think before Gabriel can answer that, can I ask Sadri if he's related by any chance to the renowned scholar Behnam Sadri, who has done work on the stylometry of the Quran?
No, I don't know him.
Okay. Okay, fine.
I had the same thought.
Okay.
He did an important study on the Sana palimpsest.
Yeah, on the stylometry.
As you say, on the
Behnam's work is wonderful on stylometry of the Quran.
Yes, yes, very nice man too. Wonderful reflection. Thank you so much. And I'm not a Christian theologian, but I know, and I teach here at Notre Dame courses on Christianity and Islam. So, I study a bit on doctrine of the Trinity. The first point I think to say about the Trinity is to keep in mind that Jesus's apostles were all Jews. So they would have prayed the Shema prayer from Deuteronomy 6, which says, "Hear, O Israel, your Lord is God, your Lord alone." Right, so they would have something like a tawheed that they would have repeated constantly, this Shema prayer, and so in that context, it would be they would have hesitancy to accept the idea that Jesus would be Son of God. And this is sort of played out in the Gospel of John, where it's only after the resurrection of Christ where the Apostle Thomas says, "My Lord and my God," to Christ. So anyway, it's in that context. And you're getting at some of the more sophisticated Trinitarian theology that is advanced by Saint Augustine, also Thomas Aquinas, that God is love. That comes from the first letter of John as well. God is love, and so they will use that to say this is best explained in the Trinity, because then God is both lover and beloved, and the love that passes between them. Part of the problem in the question of Islam and Christianity on the question of love, as I understand it, but you can correct me, Bavand, or anyone else, is the definition of love. So the Quran both speaks about whom God loves and whom God does not love. La yuhibbu zalimin, for example. But if the definition of love is to desire that which one lacks, then God would not be love. And that's one classical definition with some roots in Aristotle that Muslim theology will sometimes follow, and will lead to the hesitancy to say that God is love. Thomas Aquinas defines love as willing the good of the other, and that has different results. And so one is more comfortable to say simply that God is love. I think part of the problem is there. One last thing just on monotheism. I would really recommend the book by Aziz Al-Azmeh. Maybe everyone knows this book already, but he wrote, it's very complicated and a difficult read, but if you have lots of patience and perseverance, the book is The Emergence of Islam in Late Antiquity. very sophisticated. It's about 10 times better than anything I've ever written. But he spends, I mean, among the many other things he does, he spends a lot of attention, or pays a lot of attention to the knowledge of our inscriptions in late antiquity. And the argument that that he makes is that what happens in Mecca with the emergence of Islam is the emphasis on the figure of Allah, who was known to the Arabs before as one of many gods.
There is a course that I've enrolled for today, starting today. Is this the preamble to the same course or not? The one I've registered for 4 months.
Okay, just to address that very quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rashid must be in another conversation.
I think Raif, can you please mute him, please?
He's just muted. Yeah. So anyway, in that book, Aziz Al-Azmi really makes the emphasis that there you had a pantheon of gods in pre-Islamic Arabia, among which was El-Ilah, who becomes Allah. And he says this is not a borrowing from Syriac, where in Syriac the word for Allah is Allah. He says it doesn't come from Syriac, it comes from Arabic El-Ilah. And other gods are removed, and Allah is elevated as the only one true God. And he would place the rise of Quranic monotheism in that particular context. Anyway, I don't do justice to his argument, but I would encourage people to read Aziz Al-Azmi's book on that question.
I can see Hisham raised his hand. Please, I think Hisham.
And Abdul Majid as well.
Yeah, Abdul Majid as well, perhaps. I think whoever raised the hand first may go ahead now.
Faiz, I have to go in about 5 minutes, I'm afraid. So maybe these will be the last few.
Okay, fine. I think Gabriel has to leave now in 5 minutes, perhaps.
Yeah. So I can, 2 more questions would be good.
Yeah, 2 more questions. Hisham and Majid, perhaps. Yes. Rashid, I think you will have to wait for another occasion, I'm afraid. Since you already asked your question. Yes. No. You, Hisham or Majid?
Yeah.
Hisham, you're there. Are you there, Hisham?
I'm there, yes.
Yes, please go ahead, Hisham. Yes.
Thank you. Well, my name is Hisham Abdelgawad. I'm a PhD candidate in religious studies in Belgium.
Okay.
And thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your talk. I have fond memories of the lessons you gave years ago in Université Libre de Bruxelles, so I'm happy to hear you again. My question has to do with epistemology with regards to the history of religions. Because one big problem we have when we want to present Quranic studies to Muslim believers is the metaphysical implications of these studies. One example was already given with the question on authorship for the Qur'an. I feel like with Islamic studies, we haven't yet found a satisfactory theoretical limit between truly metaphysical neutral claims of the historians and implications for theology. And that is unlike what we can see in the works, for example, of Daniel Marguerat, who is a Swiss scholar of the New Testament and a pastor. For instance, in one of his most recent books on the biography of Jesus, he tackles the question of his birth and all the rumors about the accusations of prostitution against Mary. And at the end of the chapter, he concludes that as a historian, he can only conclude that Jesus was not born in the legitimate context of wedding, and he draws the line there. He does not conclude, for example, that it was a rape or it was prostitution. He leaves the idea of the virginal birth opened without closing the door to more natural explanations, let's say. And I feel that such metaphysical neutrality has yet to be achieved in the Islamic studies. What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you so much, Hisham. And it's nice to hear you and to reconnect in a way. I have fond memories of being at Université Libre. Are you now, very briefly, are you now still in Brussels or maybe in Leuven or Louvain?
I'm studying both in Université Libre de Bruxelles and the Catholic University of Louvain.
Louvain. Wonderful. So happy to connect. Yes. So as you know, I'm sure the old habit of Orientalist scholars when speaking about the Quran, it was to say Muhammad said, whereas Muslim believers would say God said. And then there's a sort of false compromise now where people will simply say the Quran says, at least in Western academic studies. And it's a gentle compromise. It also allows for the possibility even of multiple authorship, which if someone argues for, let's say, interpolations or redaction. So, but we haven't really gotten at the problem of how to have a real conversation in which Muslim theologians and believers and outsiders can agree on certain metaphysical principles about authorship. I remember this was a very interesting moment in the television series on Arte on Jésus et l'Islam. Maybe you know it, Hisham, where the editors asked the Muslim and non-Muslim guests, so who wrote the Quran, who is the author, and you have some different responses. I would just end with this brief reflection with the comment of Fred Donner, a professor at the University of Chicago, who says that actually no historian can either prove or disprove the revealed nature of the Quran. So even if, let's say, someone can prove, hypothetically, okay, I'm not saying this, but hypothetically, if someone says, oh, we can see there are two authors, there's a different voice in the Meccan and a different in the Medina, whatever. But that doesn't mean that God could not speak through two authors or in some other way. Obviously, it would complicate some historical notions, but the question of revelation itself is the self-unfolding of the divine. And that is something which exceeds the reach or the grasp of any historian. And so there's no threat, as I see it, just as, I mean, look at all the scholarship that's been done, some of which Faiz referred to, on the Old and New Testament, and there are still Jewish and Christian believers, as you referred to one of them, Hisham. So I think that's a starting point for me, is to separate what can be done by a historian from the work of the theologian.
Thank you.
And Gabriel, can I request you, because there's Majid has to ask. If he doesn't ask, there's another lady, Salma Trabelsi, which I can see. Maybe can you take one more question?
Okay. Yes,
because no lady has asked. I thought we should give them a chance.
Yes.
Yeah, Majid, and if Majid is not there, Salma, please.
Yes.
Thank you for what you provided about the most important thing that the book has presented.
Can you please introduce yourself? Yeah.
I am Salma from Tunisia. I am a researcher in study, Quranic study in Tunisia.
Okay.
Professor Gabriel, I work about the book in master, in my research master. But what about the role played by Zayd ibn Thabit, the writer of Revelation, to highlight the Judeo-Christian influence in the Quran? I think it's an important role of Zayd ibn Thabit.
Thank you so much, Salma. Thank you. Yeah, very happy to connect, and Allah wiki in your research. And yes, so we do have traditions that Zayd ibn Thabit studied in a Jewish school, and that another tradition which says that he learned Aramaic. You probably know these traditions. And, you know, they are interesting because, in fact, we don't have an extensive written tradition in Arabic before Islam. We have mostly inscriptions, and then the Quran is our first Arabic book. Of course, there's a tradition of poetry, but it's mostly oral. And so there, maybe behind those traditions are the idea that writing was, even if the Arabic script had developed, but the art of being a scribe was something you would learn from Jews or Christians. And if Zayd actually worked in the process of the Jama' of the Mus'haf as a scribe, then perhaps it's something he learned. But it's very difficult to confirm or deny these sorts of akhbar, and people have lots of debates about them. So thank you.
Yeah, I think if Majid is not there, we should end it here. If Majid is there, perhaps.
Yes, I am here.
Who's Majid?
I'm here.
He's there. He's speaking.
That's Rashid, not Majid.
No, Abdul Majid is speaking.
Yeah, Abdul Majid, please go ahead. Yes. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the organizer, and thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your talk.
Can you introduce yourself, please? Yeah.
Yes, I am Abdul Majid Ben Habib. I am a lecturer in social science faculty in University of Tlemcen in Algeria. Okay. And I did a thesis on Noah and his people, the dialogue between Noah and his people in the Quranic text. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
And if you can post your email ID in your chat box, I think we would many would love to be in touch with you on your research. Except I too would like to be in touch. Yes.
Yes, it will be wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your talk. I noticed that you focused on words, mainly on you emphasized the presence of external or no Arabic words in the Quran, from my humble point of view, I don't think this is particular to Orientalist or Euro-American discourse, because even Muslim scholars recognize that there are some words, external Arabic words, that we can find in the Quran. On the other hand, I think even about Arabic words, the issue is not that there are some Arabic words or no Arabic words in the Quranic text, because even Arabic words are belongs to the pre-Islamic period. In other words, that what is at stake, at least from my humble point of view, is the text itself. I mean, in other words, that the text reshape the meaning of words and convey particular intentions of the author. For Muslim scholar, for Muslim, the author is Allah himself. For no Muslim, the author is various human authors or historical authors or various languages like Aramaic, etc. But I think it's important that in Quranic study to rethink, to problematize again the issue of the Quranic text itself, rather than focusing on particular and partial words, which for me, that's it. I think it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense not itself, but for the hearer or the reader of the Quranic text now. I mean, the current hearer, what makes sense for the current hearer or the reader of the Quranic text to know about this word is no Arabic or that word is Arabic. I think if we problematize the Quranic text from this angle, we can debate in a more vigorous way about the Quranic text, and we can put the Quranic text in the same level with other important texts, by which we can think and maybe make it viable as text among other texts that it makes sense for the cosmopolitan citizen. I don't know if it makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. It was very clear, and it's a wonderful note to conclude. I think you're right that in terms of so-called foreign vocabulary, I think the text made sense to its original audience. And so a word, whether it's sijil or asatir, would have been comprehensible. So it's not just a question of the Quran introducing something completely foreign. I agree with that point completely. I also think more attention to questions of structure, but also problems of hermeneutic. What is the role of the original audience, and what is the role of the reader or the listener in the current engagement with a text? How do you produce meaning from a text are very important questions. And I know you're working on many of these, and I look forward to learning from you, Professor Ben Habib, in the future.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a
Wonderful.
lot.
Professor Habib, can you please put down your email ID? I mean, it'll be, or
Yes.
maybe if I'll put on my ID, can you just send me a message?
Yes, I will send you now.
I'll just put it here. Gabriel, just a second.
Sorry, is it possible for me to just state one word or one line?
I think that's left to Gabriel because he has to go and I can't.
No, that's fine. I do have my family waiting, so as long as it's very brief, Rashid, it's no problem.
Okay. In reaction to my fellow South African who said earlier on something which, of course, you're unhappy about, you remember the word indecision. The seven sleepers are not referred to, as you said, by indecision, as you said, but actually it states in the Quran in Surah Kahf, words to the effect, do not ask how many, as only a few know, but in particular it says, and listen to this very carefully, and now you realize why perhaps I was not allowed to ask previously. It says, and consult not any of them, Jews and Christians, about the affair of the people of the cave. So the Quran there is saying that the reason why I should not ask you particularly this question, because I believe you're either a Christian or a Jewish person, is because you are not going to get the kind of answer which is acceptable and which is, sorry to say it, truth, because it's your version of truth. I don't mean in a bad way, but it's your version of truth which differs from the Quranic version of the truth. What is your comment on that, please? It says there, consult not the Jews and the Christians.
I think
everyone who's here, I'm so grateful for everyone's attendance, and everyone has their own independent thought. They can judge my own arguments. I've been criticized, and some of my arguments I've seen are wrong, some I think are right. And I'm grateful for everyone's sympathetic patience with me. And if there was some fruit or some light that you found, that's wonderful. And I'll look forward to being in touch with you. Thank you so much, Faiz, for
Gabriel, I must thank you for your patience. Of course, you put up with some difficult questions. I can understand people have been making some unfair comments. I apologize for any unfair comment that
not at all. I'm so grateful for the back and forth, and I appreciate and respect everyone's opinion.
Yeah, so
I'm not apologizing if you think I was being ungrateful.
I think you have made your point, Rashid. You have made your point. Please, I think
I'm sorry.
I think it's not fair now because Gabriel has given us so much of his time. I mean, he's an extremely busy person, and I've been trying to get him to talk to us for a long time, and so I thank him very much for his time. There will be difference of opinion, of course, but then we have to make your point, leave it there, and not just press it. Once again, thank you so much, Gabriel, because I don't think I can give a formal vote of thanks because I know your family is waiting. I don't want to hold you back. So perhaps I'll give you a call later on the phone, and then and extremely grateful to you for your time. And that was a very insightful talk that you gave. It has given a lot of the other people who are here, I mean, a lot of insights and perhaps more motivation for men to do more research on this subject that are under discussion. And thanks a lot. I mean, I have nothing much to add now. You're waiting. Your family is waiting.
I was honored to be part of this group, and thank you for the good work you're doing. Have a good Sunday evening in Chennai, and my warmest greetings to everyone.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
I'm sorry, Gabriel. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm very sorry if you offended.
No offense at all. No worries. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.